So our speaker is Cheryl Miller. She is the managing director of Luna Data Solutions. Luna Data Solutions is a technical staffing company, and I didn't realize it exactly. I knew that the president or CEO or whatever she is a female, but I didn't realize that all of the management team is a female. Is everybody who works for them a female?
No.
Not quite. Okay. But her topic is how you have behaved how you have behaved, is the best predictor of how you will behave. So that is all about behavioral questions that you're asked in an interview, why you are asked those questions, and she's going to talk to you about what they're looking for. For over 15 years, Cheryl has been a leader in the technology sector. Her experience includes full lifecycle data integration and decision support solutions, IT service management consulting, executive search and technical recruiting services. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Rhodes College. As managing director for Luna Data Solutions, a women-owned recruiting firm specializing in technical talent, she builds client relationships and drives top-line revenue with large and small public and private sector organizations. She also currently serves as president of Austin Women in Technology. That's a terrific organization. She's the president of the technology board. She is the president of the advisory board. I'm so sorry. What's wrong with me today? Having been involved since 2010 as a member and a volunteer. Let's give a very warm Launchpad welcome to Cheryl Miller.
Thank you, Kathy. Wow. I'm glad I got here early. I learned a lot. Kathy shared a lot of information with you about how to get an interview. I'm going to be here today to talk to you about what to do when you show up for the interview. And for many of you, it may have been a really very long time since you've interviewed. And so you need to practice. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how interviewing has really changed over the years. Like anything else, it evolves. People come up with better ways and this and that. Most of you in this room will probably remember, back in the 90s, it was all about what would you do with $1 million. They want to hear, one of the questions I was asked once in an interview was, if you could be guaranteed success, what would you do with that opportunity? So the word in those questions that should resound to you is the word would. What would you do? And for many years, people could really, snow you in an interview with what they would do. And then they show up and it's like, they're not doing any of that. So employers have really smartened up, wised up, and really modern day interviews are more about, tell me about a time when, what did you do? And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how to prepare for those kinds of questions. Now, don't be concerned if you don't have a lot of work experience. I know there are a few of you in the room that maybe just got your degree. Experiences that they're looking for are going to help them paint a picture of how you behaved in the past, because that's a prediction of how you'll behave in the future, and how you behave at home and how you behave at work is really not that different. How you handle crisis at home and how you handle crisis at work is not that different. How you handle situations where you're maybe you're under pressure, or how you work well with a team, for instance, at school or with your peers or in a club or in a volunteer organization. Those experiences speak just as much to how you will behave than do work experiences. So you can certainly use those. So don't worry if you don't have a ton of work experiences to draw on. It's the summation of all of those experiences that make you what you are, and what they're really trying to drive to is, or to answer questions about you. It will vary, but it's typically going to be, how do you relate to others? How do you overcome adversity? How do you handle stress? How do you handle criticism? How do you deliver constructive criticism? et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are a lot of resources on the web around how to prepare for a behavioral interview. And there are a litany of different questions that you can be asked. And you could take the time to read every single one of those behavioral interview questions and come up with a story. That's a daunting task. And one that I'm going to say you don't need to do. What instead I'm going to say that you do need to do is prepare well. But the easy way to prepare will be think of a list of life experiences, work experiences, anecdotes that come to your mind that help to demonstrate any one of these things. So problem solving, a time when you had to solve a problem, a time when you worked with a team, maybe it was a teamwork anecdote, positive or negative. Not all teamwork activities are the best, right? But you probably learned something from it. So a time when you worked with a team, a performance under stress, leadership, an opportunity to maybe emerge as a leader, and in a time when integrity, you were called upon to exercise a high level of integrity, maybe in the face of diversity. Something where, a time when you needed to be resilient, persistent. So these are just examples to get you thinking about the story. You don't need an anecdote for all of these, because that would be a lot. And you probably have a few things going through your head right now about things that have happened to you in your life that you would want to share. Well, I have one that I'm going to share, and then we're going to do a little Q&A and a little game at the end to let you see how you could come up with, maybe from that list of things you came up with, maybe 3 or 4 that you're really going to practice and you're really going to understand how you defined the situation of the task, how you took action, and then how you responded and the results. So that's called STAR. So that's just a little formula. After you make this list, what am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to put it in what I call a STAR format. So you're going to tell the interviewer what the situation was, how you took action, and how you resolved it, in every situation. So no matter what the behavioral question is. So I'm gonna give you an example, and then we're going to talk about what kind of behavioral questions could I have used that anecdote for. And I think you'll see that you're going to unlock the power of maybe 3 really powerful anecdotes that could be responsive to a whole litany of different behavioral questions. Okay, so there was a time in my career when I was doing business in the public sector. We talked earlier, Kathy did, about it is a bit different. So not only is the interview process different, but the business culture and how you win business and do business in the public sector is different as well. We had already won a sizable piece of business with this public sector customer, a very large sum of business, delivered it successfully over a 2-year period. So we were given an opportunity to bid on the second piece of business. Another 2-year, we were the incumbent. I mean, it was ours to lose. We spent a lot of time still responding to it, several, man hours, many members of the team for several weeks putting together this response. We flew people in, we did oral interviews, and we were awarded the deal. And then they asked us for our financial statements. It was not a requirement the first time we had won the business, and now they're asking for it. Oops. And the owner of the company didn't want to offer it, didn't want to provide it, and pretty much absolutely refused to cough it up. He just wasn't gonna He wasn't going to share the crown jewels with anybody. And I asked and I asked, and I was persistent, and it was still a no. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. This was a guaranteed success. And they were just asking for some numbers on a piece of paper. I didn't really think it was a big deal. So I took a walk around the block, and then I reached out to somebody that I really, really trust. Somebody that's really, really smart, that has a lot of information when it comes to the realm of finance, because I don't. That's not my skill set. University of Chicago MBA, so I leveraged my network. Never mind, it was my husband, but still. Babe, what are we gonna do? And I told them, I'm pretty sure they just need a checkbox. They know we're financially sound. We already did business for 2 years, but this is the government and they need a checkbox. Pretty sure it's just a checkbox. What is the bare minimum of information that we can provide so they can check the box? He thought it was a really weird question, but, I was like, very, very bare minimum of information that checks the box. And so he came up with this, it was like a one-pager thing. And so I pitched it to the owner of the company, and he said, okay. But he was willing to walk away from the business. We were going to lose the business. He was 20 years my senior, and I was problem solving this for the company. And I look back now and I think, what kind of behavioral interview questions could I use that story to demonstrate? Does anybody have any ideas?
Sure, problem solving.
Problem solver. So competing or maybe differing opinions with leadership. So if I...
Overcoming objections.
Overcoming objections.
Tell me about a time you were emotionally stressed.
Tell me about a time you were emotionally distressed. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. I didn't read that part about the financial statement and ask in advance before we spent, 150 man hours responding that we were going to need to provide this and overcome that objective in advance. That would be a really good anecdote for that, because it's not really a mistake. I mean, you want to pick the mistake that turns out really good, Just do it and ask for forgiveness later. But still, you're gonna use it as your example for tell me about a time when you made a mistake and how did you overcome it. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult employee. Never mind that he owned the company. You could even use it there. So we have just come up with, 8, 10 different behavioral questions where I could, if I structured that story a little bit differently and emphasized more around how much stress it caused me, or maybe how I problem solved it, how I reached out to a network and got help when I didn't know what to do, external resources, I could have just elaborated a little bit more on any one of the elements of the story and been responsive to that question. So that was meant really just as an example of how, get these stories and tell them and to yourself in such a way and be so familiar with them that you can elaborate. They're wanting you to give them the goods when they ask that question. Tell me about a time when. Give them the goods. So start out with the situation, walk through it, talk about how you took action, and then make sure you end with the result. So the result is we won the business. We enjoyed 2-3 more years worth of very, very good business with that customer. Then, does it matter whether it was a $6,000 deal or a $60,000 deal or a $600,000 deal or a $6 million deal? Doesn't. It was a $600,000 deal. But it doesn't really matter. It could have been a $6,000 deal, and it still is very demonstrative about how I handled those situations. So no experience that you can share with passion that talks about how you addressed or overcame is going to be inconsequential to the person interviewing you. So don't let it be. It can be the time when, you had to help the team rally, in overtime in the 11th inning while you had the flu, and you had to muster the courage, or you had to help, whatever it is. It just needs to be a story that you feel passionate about. So I hope that helps a little. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about all the different kind of behavioral questions that you might get asked, but I would encourage you to come up with that list and then go and see, how would I answer that question if asked this behavioral question or this behavioral question. Sometimes when you're interviewing, an inexperienced interviewer may ask you a question in a way that is still using the old, what would you do? What would you do, if the customer kept throwing out objections? Okay, let's just say that, Well, many people would go ahead and follow on with well, here's what I would do. No. Immediately, because you're the skilled one, right? You say, well, let me tell you about a time when I had to overcome an objection. Now, I could go into that story now, because he objected and said no. And so the objection, my response would be then, how I overcame that objection was I thought through, how can I change the ball game so that I am mitigating the risk to make the customer, in this case I was selling internally, which I really hate to do, but you have to do it a lot, to remove the objection, because he was my customer. I had to convince him to say yes. The real customer already told me yes. So anytime you get a would question, don't answer it with a here's what I would do. Reposition it with, well, let me tell you about a time when I was faced with an objection. So that's kind of clue number 2. Now, I get it. In an interview, behavioral questions are only going to be part of what you're going to be faced with. There's still going to be questions about, that are technical in nature. They're going to want to know about your, technical skills, or their technical screen, or what have you. But more and more, they're measuring your EQ, your emotional quotient, and being able to answer with behavioral interviews is just much better at getting them to the place where they check the box. Yes, they overcame, or they answered that question, or they've alleviated any issues or concerns I may have about their ability to handle stress, or work with others, or give constructive criticism, or whatever the question may be. And then the next thing that I wanted to touch on is you're also going to have questions that you don't really want to answer, because why did you leave that job, or how come you're not still at XYZ company? That's the big, hairy question that we always have to answer, and we're all sitting in this room right now thinking, I don't want to have to answer that one, right? Well, first of all, everybody interviewing you knows that you didn't leave the job because you're making a ton of money and your boss was awesome and it was such a rewarding career. Okay, they already know that. What they're looking for is how you can answer that question in a way that isn't negative, that you're not going to bash your job, that you're not going to sell yourself short, or that you're not going to make excuses for yourself, right? So this is one that you need to practice too. It's not really a interview question, but I think it's important enough that I think it would be really good for us all to practice it. A couple of good examples. Okay, so let's say that you left the company because you were asked to leave. Okay. A good response would be, while I really enjoyed my time at XYZ company and I learned a lot, my coworkers were amazing, I came to a point, or we came to a point, where I was ready to leverage my experience elsewhere.
I love it.
Tell me about some of the challenges and projects that you have coming down the pike in 2020 where you feel like my experience could be leveraged. Okay.
One the last time you ran for office, right?
So you can use that anytime. They're not really wanting you to say, well, you know, I got laid off, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, if they really, really need to go there and ask you 14 different times, well, were you laid off? Well, were you laid off? Yeah, I was laid off. But at no point do you need to sink to their level, if that's how they're going to want to play the interview, or you have to then get into a defense, don't let them push you into a defensive posture where you have to, you know, bash the company or bash the integrity of the company or, you know, bash the culture of the company or, you know, the VP of sales wasn't selling anything, so they had to lay a whole bunch of people off. Or, no, you don't even really need to go there, you know. So I just try when you can to take the high road and keep it positive. So the third thing you can really practice in the behavioral interview when you're answering any question is try to see if you can reword the response in a way where it sounds positive, right? So before you answer, think, is there a way that I could position this response in a way where it's a glass half full instead of a glass half empty response? Because being positive is the most important thing. Because when I'm interviewing people, and I interview people a lot, because I work for a recruiting agency and we're screening people all day long, when somebody makes the hair rise on the back of my neck because they said something icky or negative, or if they throw up on me, that's what I like to call it, I'm out. They're done. I'm hard, I'm sorry. I'm a tough sell. So try to think of a way to not raise the hair on the back of Cheryl's neck when you're answering a question. Keep it positive. Because keeping it positive that's who you'd want to have working next to you. And positive is so important in an interview. It's so important in a job. It's so important. Your confidence in yourself will go down if you're not positive. And so leave the ick on the floor. If you need to vent about it, and then leave it on the floor. Do not take it to the interview. Even if you're having to like bite your tongue the whole time you're saying, you know, figure out a way to say it. And you can be true to yourself. Just position it in a way where it comes across at least positive or at least hopeful. And then immediately get them back involved with another question. The reason positive attitude is so important is because when companies are looking at what I call your EQ or your whole person, these behavioral questions are really, in my opinion, trying to drive out 5 things. They're trying to drive out whether or not you're confident, whether or not you're communicative, whether or not you can conceptualize a solution. Confident, communicative, conceptualize a solution, whether you're charismatic, and there's one more. And I'll think of it in a minute. Pardon? Curious? No, but I like that. We'll go with it. In any case, they're really trying to see your whole picture. Okay? Let's see. So, I want to make. We also want to make sure that we can focus on results. So when you're doing those questions, if and when there are numbers, results, impact, how it impacted you, how it impacted others, try to be as specific and offer as much detail as you can, because that makes it real. And they can really sink their teeth into that. Let's see. That was a lot of information to throw at you in a really short period of time. But yes, companies are more interested in what you have done than what you would do. Question, thank you.
Sure. So really more of a suggestion. So I have made flashcards for my situations, my STAR situations, and I've written the situation, the task, the action, the result, and I'll have those out for me, you know, on paper, not just on the screen because we're having to look at something on the computer, and they'll be right there for me. And I'll put a little sticky on the side that says what those situations are. So if the question is leading to, you know, how were you created, or how did you overcome a disagreement with a coworker, all of that is just right there on hand, and I can.
That's a really good idea, especially because now so many interviews, especially the first or second interview, take place over the phone. And that is typically where they're really driving towards a lot of these kind of EQ questions. They typically will save, you know, the nitty-gritty technical stuff for when you come on site, if it's a technical interview. Sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on top of that by saying that I had my first interview in decades with a Texas state agency about a month or so back. And so when I thought, wow, how am I going to get ready for this? Of course, I was online. And it wasn't long before I stumbled across a website called the 31 Most Often Asked Questions in an Interview. And a lot of the questions are dealing with exactly what you're saying. And I also I bought some index cards and not only wrote out my answers to all these questions in a notebook, but then summarized them on those cards, and that helped me prepare for that interview enormously.
So preparation, there's no substitute for preparation. So you're not going to be able to do it on the fly, but you just don't have to have an answer to all 30 of them is all I'm saying. Have 3 really impactful examples.
Well, that's a question about the leading the last job. If you're able to speak to changing market and business conditions, shows you actually understand the business decisions and eliminate certain departments or positions. Is that a positive way? Is that still enough positive? Because what I like to convey is that I really do understand the business top to bottom, why that group of positions was eliminated. Is it change in the market conditions, not something the business did wrong?
Yeah, but you're still going to preface it with positive. I learned a lot there. I had a really rewarding career, and it was time for me to leverage my experience elsewhere when the market shifted. But just be careful that we're not making the excuse that it's the market. And if you're the VP of sales and sales are tanking, okay, well, that's not going to be a very good example. So just be careful that, you weren't part of the reason why 400 people got laid off. Yeah, just be mindful of that. Sir?
I've been preparing for interviews, done some interviews, but I haven't read much on how to approach. I had this interview where the gentleman said, now we have quite a bit of time for you to ask me questions. And I was kind of baffled. I mean, I just asked him about, I just jumped in and asked about salary. That's only, that was my main question. But I'm not sure exactly where to go with. He said, we have a lot of time. Why don't you ask me questions?
So, really, you are about to invest a lot of time to make yourself and this company successful, and it should be 50-50. You should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And if they think that you just want a job because you don't have one, they need to really feel like that you're doing your due diligence as well. I would say questions around salary, benefits, questions about that are not the questions that they're looking for. The questions they're looking for are, why is this position open? How many people are on this team? what's the maturity of this team? Is it a new team? You know, what's the business drivers behind this team? And instead of asking, what's the career path for me on this team? It's like you ask questions instead. How much has this team grown over the course of the past year? Do you envision more team growth? What's driving that growth? Having an interest and an understanding of the business that's driving the opening for the position. Don't ask questions though that are obvious on the website. You know, how long has the company been around? But specific questions about the team. Tell me a little bit about the team culture. When you guys are looking to make a decision around a new product, what other parts of the organization are involved? What does your cross-functional communication look like when you're trying to make company decisions? Because that's what you really care about, isn't it? I mean, when you go to work someplace and then you find out everybody's just kind of siloed, or the team has lost half of the people there in the last 6 months, and the reason that this position's open is because they've let the person that's in this role go the last 3 times they've hired them, you're maybe not going to want that job. Question?
Actually, another suggestion. If any of the questions they asked you, you didn't already ask them how you would, how your new roles and responsibilities would include you dealing with that sort of situation, you can bring up those questions and say, we discussed how I manage things under pressure in a fast-paced, fluid environment. Can you describe to me how I might experience that or encounter that sort of situation in the role we're talking about? And that gets them talking and also gets them thinking of you in the position. So that helps a lot, especially when you're dealing with hiring managers. HR people, maybe not so much because they're not fully versed in the what you'll experience in the role, but definitely with the hiring managers.
When you're done answering a question, so maybe the one about how have you dealt with a difficult employee in the past? You answer that question. And then ask, have you had issues with coworkers not being able to get along? Can you tell me about that? If you sprinkle a few questions in, then at the end when they ask for questions, say, you've answered my questions along the way and I appreciate it. Because it's not like you left without having asked any questions. But if they're asking you about stressful situations that you've been in or difficult coworkers that you'll have to deal with, or what would you do if, or tell me about a time when the priorities changed and you needed to pivot quickly. Well, after you tell them about a time when that happened, you say, well, tell me a little bit about the canter of projects here. Would you say that teams are asked to pivot often? And you're going to drill into that. If they're like, yeah, it's a hot mess around here, and we never know which side's up or down. Okay. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. Sir?
Is there in your experience, is there a significant difference in interviewing for a more senior level position, director level or above, than an individual contributor role? And I'm asking this from the framework of, I've been doing a lot of research lately on interviewing for more senior level roles, and they're saying that it's less about the behavioral stuff and it's really more about the problems that you can solve. So what's your experience or knowledge behind?
You make a good point. You'll have more problem-solving questions and leadership-type questions and mentoring and management-type questions at that level than you will maybe, tell me about how you manage your time, or, it's some of the things that the questions will definitely be more focused around, leadership, et cetera. In an individual contributor role, you might still be asked a question, tell me about a time you championed an idea that was unpopular in the workplace. Because they want to hear from people that aren't managers around, that have good ideas. And they want to see that people that are individual contributors will also stand up and be, have a voice, take a stand, be a leader, or be a mentor.
So STAR doesn't, would you say STAR doesn't necessarily apply as much to the
No, I think that format is still appropriate, for sure. I think you still answer the question in a behavioral way with an example. I just think that the questions that they're going to ask you in a senior level role are going to be, like I said, more driving towards leadership or strategic or managing others. But I think that's always the best formula, is to come up with examples. Kathy?
Lots of people have gaps in their work history. Can you tell us what your advice would be on how to successfully handle explaining that?
I think honesty is always the best policy.
What if the gap was because you were dealing with cancer?
Then I think you say that. Unless you're not comfortable sharing. And you don't have to overshare. You can still be truthful. So there's a saying, and I don't remember where I said it, but it will serve you well. In an interview, it is never what you should have said that you didn't say. It's what you said that you shouldn't have said that's going to be the reason you don't get the job. You can still be truthful. You don't have to overshare. Answer the question. Don't offer more information than is necessary. I was dealing with a personal medical issue, and I'm proud to say that I overcame it, and I'm sitting here in front of you now ready to leverage all of my work experience that came before my illness. And I'm, move on. But I think the truth will set you free. Sir?
The interview is there with the most popular or most often deal with your question how they should be used to it, so conversation. That's so much fun.
I think we talked about it. His question was, in an interview, is there a scenario where it's like the worst case response to a question that makes it a deal breaker for the employer? And I think I touched on it already. It's when you're focusing on the negative aspect of whatever. Most of the time, it's boss bashing. You got to figure out a way to. They all know if your boss was awesome, you would probably still be there. Okay, so just don't bash your company, your employer, your boss. Question?
Yeah, so I've had a couple interviews recently and starting to feel like there's something not doing quite right. The jobs don't exactly match with my work experience, and it's with the state, so they keep asking very specific questions. Do you have this specific experience? They only have this set of questions to ask everybody. And I always have to answer honestly, no, I don't have experience doing that very specific thing that you asked me. But I do have these experiences that complement and match well and show that I've done, have the same skill set and doing other things. And I don't know if that's what keeps, getting me kicked out. Somebody actually called me finally, I was their second choice. I've just been kind of hurt a couple times.
So first of all, let me say congratulations for getting to the interview. There was something in your experience that made them want to interview you, and I don't doubt that you came in second. And what's going to happen is it's a numbers game. And the more you interview, the better you're going to get at it. A couple of things that you could do to kind of maybe eke out a few more points during that interview, because they're scoring it. It's the state. They're checking boxes. And this is really for all of you. When you're asked a question, whether it be behavioral or skills-based like hers, right? And you don't really have an anecdote that you're not shoehorning any of those examples into that question, really, right? What am I going to do? You need to ask for permission before you throw out the BS, okay? That's what I call it. You know, you're going to ask for permission first, right? You're going to say, while I don't have an example of that specifically, or I don't have that type of experience specifically, I would draw on the experience I garnered during a time when and then you're going to, do you mind if I share it? So you're asking for permission before you do the bait and switch, right? And then with regards to the experience, I might be so bold to say my goal in my next career is to expose myself to experiences that I don't have, because that's the only way I'm going to grow. And and if I had everything you're looking for, I'd probably be interviewing for something else, because I just don't need to do a redo. You know? I mean, because this is, right, career progression. And you don't have to say it as cheeky as that, but don't be afraid to not have everything, and don't apologize for it. I don't have everything you're looking for, but I have enough of it that I will be effective from day one, and I relish the opportunity to learn the rest of it, because that's what I'm going to need in order to make this a good career decision for me, that I'm going to learn some new skills. Would you be willing to teach me that? And you put the question right back on them. Yeah, I mean, why not? Again, that's a positive way of answering the question rather than saying, no, I don't really have that.
Can you repeat that?
I think he's videotaping it. No, I'm kidding.
As much as it is.
Pardon me?
As much as you can remember.
As much as I can remember. Wow. While I don't have that experience specifically, I've got at least 80% or whatever it is of the experience that you're looking for. And in order for this to be a good career decision for me, I need an opportunity to learn something new. I'm confident that I could hit the ground running my first day and be effective for this organization. Would you be willing to teach me that? Sir in the back?
Cheryl, do you ever have a situation where you have to push back on a client because you feel that they're doing things that are detrimental to their position, and push back and say, no, I think you need to approach this differently to get a better person?
Are you talking about the interviewer?
The interviewer, and also the client when in your business, do you ever have to push back on the company that's going to be interviewing, and push back and say, you're going in the wrong direction, we think you should be doing this? Because that to me is someone who's really giving good consulting, good advice, because some big companies just don't want to hear their own bad music.
Yeah, I mean, well, I consult with my clients all the time. My job is not to sell my customers anything. My job is to make them better customers. And so I'll ask for permission. If I may, can we talk about how this approach or this candidate or whatever it may be, we could solve this problem better, fill this position quicker, if we honed this process, if we got better feedback, if you revisited your market rate, if whatnot. So if I see that we're not having success, I'll help counsel them on how to be more successful. And if I see them passing on someone that I feel pretty strongly about, I pound the table. And I don't always win, and don't be afraid to pound the table for yourself. Many times by the time you get word that you didn't get the job, it's too late to pound the table because they already made the offer on somebody else. But a good question to end with, if you can't think of any others and you haven't asked any along the way, is there anything that we discussed where I've left you wanting more information, where I may have been lacking, where we can take an opportunity to elaborate? I can offer another example. That's never a bad idea. Yes.
I have, I hope this isn't too specific of a question about interviews. Lots of times in technical interviews, a company will ask, how would you solve this problem? And they want specifics, not just a general answer. They, step by step, because they're looking to see if you have specific skills. But more on the other side of it, more times than not, my friends have come back and said that their answer, or the way that they solved the question, solved the problem, was not what the company wanted, or the company specifically said we weren't looking for that type of, how can I describe it? They didn't want to be told how to do something a certain way, as though the person they were interviewing was saying this is the one and only way to solve this question. So I guess the question I'm asking is, when you're doing a problem-solving question in an interview, how can you present it in such a way that you're saying this is one option, but there are other options that we could go with?
I don't know that you necessarily need to water it down with that or preface it with that. In my experience, more often than not, when companies are truly asking you problem-solving questions and not just straight technical, here's how you do it. And even in programming, there's more than one way to skin the cat, right? But most of the time when they ask you problem-solving questions, they're wanting to see how you problem-solve. And even if you don't come up with the right answer, they're wanting to see how you got to the answer that you got to, and then they want to see how you defend it. It's important, because if you just back down and go, but if they say, well, that was a sort of a long way to get there. If you cave, right, then you might be acquiescing in a way that makes you seem flexible, but then they've just lost that other half of the question, which is you're going to stand up for what you think is right, and they've lost a key member of the team that's going to be there when they need another voice of reason in the room, because you're following Sam, right?
They're looking for the nuance between just here's a solution versus, well, maybe there's more.
Before you start, say, while I know there are several ways where we could approach this problem, this one comes to mind first. And when you're done, say, if you don't mind, are there other ways that we could have shared, that we could have solved that problem? If nothing else, I'm here to learn. And then that's another way of opening it up, rather than softening it and then,
I have a statement and then a question. Basically, I have asked in an interview, what about my resume do you like for this role? So then I will, if by chance I don't know to that step, what they like. And that was back to Aaron's question. So you're kind of standing while you're there today to have that conversation, and then you're asking me that question about the skill. So anyway, it'll be a little bit more symbiotic, if you will. So my question is...
Do you ask that at the beginning of the interview?
Yes.
Okay, so what she's doing is just, another way of not falling into the classic trap when you sit down at the interview table and they say, well, tell me about yourself. Don't ever answer that question without qualifying it first. A good response to that question, for instance, would be, well, what was it about my experience that made you want to bring me in for an interview? Because clearly that's the part they want to hear about. Not, well, I grew up in Mississippi, and, so you could go on forever, But good point. So you can ask that at some point early on so that you're being sure and emphasize information about yourself that highlights the experience that drew them to want to invite you in for the interview. Good question.
And that was my question.
I had somebody ask me in the phone interview recently. I've heard people do this, I've never gotten it done to me. If you could be any animal, what would it be? So, that was my response. I mean, really? It was the Energizer Bunny. That was the closest thing I could.
So human,
You know what they're really more interested in is what comes after that answer. So they're more interested in the why. So it's the why you picked it, because it's a really cheap way for them to find out what drives you. That it's a better way of saying, because I'm a high energy, or why? Because I'm high energy. I hop, I run, I don't know. I beat my own drum, I don't know.
I was curious about body language using things, especially in non-traditional interview settings. So like some startups have socials now, so like crossing legs or leaning back because you're kind of already in this like awkward, uncomfortable. You're not at a conference table like traditionally. Is there any do's and don'ts there?
Yeah, I would just say read your audience. But I would say err on being, more formal and less casual than they are.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that. I think in a lot of situations, especially interview ones, you mirror them. I think there's some comfort that people derive from seeing that the person opposite you is posed or sitting in the way that you are. So if their legs are crossed, then maybe think about crossing their own legs.
That's a good suggestion. The biggest body language tip, though, I can give you is eye contact. If you're interviewing with me and you're not looking at me, you're sunk. I was coaching somebody about a year ago, and he would not look at me. Would not. And I finally had to ask him, am I making you nervous? Because I wanted to help him. And he finally confessed. I've got a lot going on, this and that. He opened up to me about why he's in this really low confidence period of his life. And once we got past it and we figured out that there was something that he had a true passion about, and I got him talking about it, he was a changed person. He was so excited. So I would say, eye contact, and if you're feeling, like very nervous in the interview, try your best in the very beginning to find something that the two of you have in common that energizes you. And you don't hijack the interview, but if he's got a picture or she's got a picture of her daughter in the soccer uniform, I coach soccer. Oh wow, yeah, I love that. It gives me an opportunity to mentor young people. Yeah, what league are you in? Oh really? Great. Because then all of a sudden she sees that you have enthusiasm for something that's not work, or even if it's work. Oh yeah, I love blockchain. I blockchain at home all the time. where do you blockchain? You know, I mean, but just find something that gets you excited about the interview and pulls you out of your shell and makes you connect with the person. And the body language, eye contact is so important. And some level of enthusiasm and connection with the interviewer, even if you have to falsely establish it early.
Last question.
Speaking of confidence, is it possible to be overconfident? And I don't mean in an arrogant way, but, you know, somebody like me interviewing somebody with somebody that's, you know, 30 years old. I've had some really good interviews with Google and some really big companies that I thought for sure I was locked in. I said everything perfectly, I had answers, solutions to all their questions and everything. And then got rejected. And I'm just like, I'm feeling like it's almost like a threat to them that I have so much knowledge and so much experience and that I bring so much to the table.
The best way to temper that is say, I have been blessed to have learned so much and I have a lot to offer. What I'm hoping I can do in this role is, what can I learn now? You emphasized all the experience you bring, and then you closed it with a big dose of humility that you still have a lot left to learn. I interviewed a gal once, and she talked the talk like you cannot believe. It's like, oh my gosh, if she can do all that, you know, where's her bag of money, right? And I was on the fence about her, and I put her on the side burner, and I took her off the side burner, and I ended up hiring her, and she did not work out. She had so much baggage. That's why she couldn't carry the pile of money.